Okay, welcome to Dr. James Beckett Sports Card Insights. I'm here with Mike Sommer, as you can see from the show title, and we are in the coronavirus days. So these interviews that I really prefer, I would have loved to interview Mike in person, and maybe we'll get a chance to do that at the National or some other time if that even happens, which we're hoping and praying that it does, again, as long as it's safe. But in the meantime, we're going to have a nice phone call and hopefully provide some value for you listeners. First, thanks to our sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Heritage Auctions, Huggins and Scott Auctions, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike's Stadium Sports Cards, Upper Deck, Topps, and Panini. Mike, welcome to the show. Are you living up to your name of being a Wax Pack hero?
I am doing my best. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to join you today. So yeah, I'm doing my best to be a Wax Pack hero.
Where'd that come from? Is that from Foreigner?
No, it's just one of those things that I enjoy, opening packs of cards. You know, I grew up in the 80s, and so wax packs were still made from wax paper at that point. It was before the transition to cellophane. And so it's just kind of that thinking about, I enjoy opening cards, enjoy opening those wax packs, and I enjoy talking about the heroes that came out of those wax packs. And so I kind of mashed that all together and created Wax Pack Hero.
I love it. Well, tell us about your hobby journey. Were you how serious you were as a collector when you were a kid, and to what extent you're recapturing that in this Mike Sommer 2.0?
Yeah, sure. So I got my first pack of cards back in 1986, the summer of 1986, and it actually wasn't a wax pack; it was a cello pack. That was around the time that I was just starting to get into Little League and start to pay attention to professional baseball. And my grandma was a big Cubs fan and converted me to become a Cubs fan. And so I was at the store with my mom one day, and sitting on top of the counter of this department store was a cello box of Topps. And right on top, I saw a Cubs player. It turned out to be Thad Bosley. And so the cello pack with a 1986 Thad Bosley right on top was the first pack of cards I ever got. And so that got me started. And as I started to enjoy all of that, I found more and more kids in my neighborhood who collected. And there was a big group of us that were always buying packs and buying and trading and all that kind of thing, like we did, back then. And so gradually just got more and more into it over the next several years. And so he was a pretty avid collector from 86 up through around 94, 95 or so when I graduated high school. And so
great years.
Pretty much right in the heart of the junk wax era.
Well, it was more than just junk wax. There were great availability of cards. Let's put it that way. Did you frequent a local card shop, or did you hit some of the shows, the media? There were tons of shows back, at least maybe not 86, but by the late 80s, early 90s, there were shows everywhere. There were stores everywhere. Did you have favorites in that regard, or were you more of a
So when I was getting started, I grew up in a small town of about 5,000 people or so. And so we had a local shop.
I was going to say you only had 3 card shops then, and that's
we had over those years. Yeah, over those years there was 1 or 2 that popped up, but they didn't really last. And so my primary source of getting cards was the grocery store and the gas station, the 5 and dime. We had Ben Franklin 5 and dime stores in town, and so those were my primary sources. Occasionally, we'd make a trip into Peoria, every couple of weeks, which was a lot bigger town. And so there was a card shop there that I would get to go to every so often when we get into Peoria, as well as some of the bigger department stores like Kmart and Walmart and places like that. But my primary place early on was pretty limited to Topps, because that's all that the gas stations and the grocery stores carried, especially those first few years.
What about shows? Did you ever hit any of the big Chicago shows, or?
Never Chicago show. There was shows at the mall in Peoria that we would get to in kind of my early high school years. Once I could drive, my later high school years, I was able to go to some of those. But maybe one of the differences is my dad wasn't into collecting at all. He was a baseball fan. We watched games, but he wasn't into collecting really at all. And so I didn't have that connection of an adult who was also into it to take me to some of those places as a kid. And so it was really kind of limited to where I could get to on my bike.
Did you have a best collecting buddy? Were you have a little posse or a best friend, or was it more solitary for you when you were in your preteen years?
Yeah, early on, those first few years, there were a couple of kids who were a few years older than me that collected quite a bit. I was 8 or 9, and they were maybe 12 or 13, and so we collected quite a bit, passed some things back and forth. it probably led to one of my biggest collecting lessons learned. I think is I had it was right after the Bears won the Super Bowl in '86, so it was probably that next year. I had a '68 Gale Sayers, and he had a Jim McMahon rookie card, and we worked out a few other things and looked at the annual Beckett kind of pocket guide, the smaller one, and came up with an equivalent price based on all the prices that were listed in there. But several years later, that it didn't work out so well for me compared to him. But so there were a few people like that I collected with early on, and then the same thing. I had found a few more buddies who were pretty into it that we collected together in those junior high and high school years as well.
Okay, you said you kind of took a hiatus in 94, 95, I think you said. Was that partly due to the baseball strike, or were you just coming of a certain age, or what were your circumstance there?
Yeah, I think it was partially the strike. That was frustrating. And partially, I think it was just the age. That was, my later years of high school. I played basketball all throughout junior high and high school. And so those last couple of years, I was much more focused on basketball cards and Michael Jordan and trying to get those. And so there was a pivot there to basketball for the tail end of that, especially when the strike hit. But then it was just kind of age, it's going off to college and figuring out all of that stuff post college. And it was probably about from almost a 20-year break, probably from 95, 96 till around 2015 when I finally came back into the hobby.
What popped you back in? I mean, what came to your attention? Was it a person or a kind of a coincidence kind of thing? How'd that happen?
I'd say it was really kind of a coincidence. I never got rid of my cards from being a kid. I've had them in my closet. I had them when I made a few relocations around the country. Actually, we moved to Canada for a couple of years and came back for my job. And I kept them throughout that whole period of time. But it was somewhere around Black Friday sales. I don't know if I was looking on ESPN or some sports site, but a banner ad of all things for DA Card World popped up. And I clicked on it and I started to look around. I was like, hey, there's some good prices on here. I remember, opening this brand or this brand when I was a kid. It might be kind of fun to open up a couple boxes. So maybe I'll check it out and order it. And so I actually ordered a few boxes off of DA Card World and had a lot of fun opening them. And that said, I wonder if there's any shops in town now. And so I searched and found the local card shop here in town. And one thing led to another, building a relationship with the owner of the Collectible Corner here in Normal, Illinois. That helped get me back up to speed on what I had been missing, and that's kind of what reinvigorated my collecting journey.
Did you go to the National last year?
Yes, I went last year.
Chicago, yeah.
Yep. I was there last year, and 2 years ago was actually the first National I'd ever been to, and then last year I came again and had a chance to do some things there and be up with Eric on the main stage for one of the content creation panels. And yep.
What else were you doing there? How did you spend your? Were you there for a few days, or what was your schedule like? I mean, what was on your agenda? Are you? I'm a recovering structureaholic, I think. So I mean, I basically have to give myself permission to be more free form. And so when I go to the National, I try to have some free form time that's not set up with meetings like I used to have when I was very, very involved. So were you unstructured or structured when you were at the National?
Sure. So when I went, 2017 was the first National in Chicago. That was my first National I'd ever been to. And that one was actually before I had even started the blog or anything like that. And so that one was purely to take it all in and check it out and see what it was all about. And then at the beginning of 2018 is when I had started the blog. And so by the summer of last year, 2019, I was pretty into the blog and doing that type of thing. So I wanted to be intentional about also getting some content and having some conversations with people and doing some of that as well. And so it was half shopping, half, seeing what I could find for my collection. And then the other half, I had some interviews lined up and some other conversations that I wanted to have with different people in the industry and from the different companies and things like that. So last year was a kind of half business, half personal for me.
Well, I hope we can get something scheduled for this year. Although, are you going to Atlantic City? I mean, that's kind of assuming that it even happens. But are you going to just wait for the following year in Chicago?
I'll probably be waiting for Chicago at this point, I think.
Yeah, I might be too, which is again, very well. It's not disappointing. I don't want to go someplace where it's not safe. I don't want people to go there and be unsafe either. But again, the hobby has been going so strong. What are the themes? Tell us about your Wax Pack Hero podcast. I'm not a big blog reader, but I am a pretty aggressive podcast listener, and so I've been subscribed to your podcast and really enjoy it and appreciate the format. And it's quick hitting and hard hitting. Without being mean, you're an excellent podcast host. So, how did you? Was that just coming off your blog? And what was? How much are you enjoying that as much as I am?
Yeah, thanks. It's been a lot of fun. And so, the reason I started the blog was because, as I had mentioned, there was so much that had changed since the '90s in collecting to where it's at today. And it took me some effort to learn and get back up to speed. And I wanted to start or provide a resource for other people to help maybe facilitate their re-entry into the hobby. And so that's where things kind of had started. And as I was getting back into it and sharing some of this, I found myself starting to share more and more about how to have a self-sustaining hobby. And so both the buying and the collecting aspect, but also how I was approaching selling, so that I could offset the cost of that and maybe generate a little extra money on the side. And so as I was starting to write more and more about that, I was enjoying that aspect of educating collectors. And so as I built some relationships with some other podcasters, the guys from About the Cards, they had invited me to be a guest host on their show a few times. And I really kind of enjoyed getting a chance to do some of the audio and video dialogue and conversations, and said, you know what? Maybe I should start one of my own. There's some guys like Gary Vee and some other content creators who were really encouraging people to start creating content and sharing their stories and sharing their message. And as I thought about it, there weren't a ton of other podcasts out there that were kind of blending both that hobby and business side of collecting. And so I thought, hey, let's take a shot and see what people think. And I can share what I've been doing and the strategies that I use, and maybe they'll be helpful to other people.
That's a great note to end on. We're out of time, Mike, but that's exactly what you're doing for me. I mean, I'm enjoying all the podcasts and certainly yours, and recommend it to others. It's Wax Pack Hero. Mike Sommer's the host. Are you once or twice a week now? Once a week?
It's twice a week. Yep.
Well, again, it's timely, it's well done, and recommended. So thanks, listeners. We'll be back again tomorrow. Mike, you and I we're out of time for today, but I'm going to get you back on. And we're going to do, I've got an interesting format. So listeners, be tuned in for the next time I bring Mike on as a guest. So thanks, Mike. Thanks, listeners. Be back again tomorrow with another episode.
The man in the house of cards. The man in the house of cards. The man in the house of cards is doing all right.